We all know about the special relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom. It's a bond we see all the time: prime ministers and presidents standing shoulder to shoulder, talking about shared values and a friendship forged in the fires of world wars. It feels like a permanent, unshakable part of our world, an alliance as natural as the Atlantic Ocean itself. But what if I told you that for the first 100 years or so, America and Britain were bitter rivals? That they were locked in their own kind of Cold War, with both sides making serious plans for a hot one? What if the special relationship isn't a story of natural friendship at all, but a calculated, century-long power shift where a rebellious colony ended up eclipsing its former master? This isn't just the story of two countries. It's the story of how our modern world was built. To understand the friendship, you first have to understand the hostility. This story doesn't start with a handshake. It starts with cannon smoke and the bitter aftermath of revolution. The American War of Independence was more than just a colonial uprising. It was a messy, ideological divorce that left a deep legacy of mistrust. For Britain, losing its American colonies was a humiliating blow. For the new United States, Britain was the old tyrant lurking just over the horizon, ready to take back what it had lost. And that fear wasn't just paranoia. Less than 30 years later, they were at it again. The War of 1812 is often a footnote in British history, but for Americans, it was a fight for their nation's very survival. British troops marched on Washington, D.C., and burned the White House to the ground, an act of incredible boldness. That war cemented Britain as America's #1 enemy. For the rest of the 19th century, this rivalry just simmered. Open war was avoided, but a tense chess match played out across North America. The U.S., guided by its 1823 Monroe Doctrine, basically declared the Western Hemisphere off-limits to Europe. It was an arrogant move for a young nation, but as American power grew, the British Empire and its powerful navy started to grudgingly respect it. Economically, they were rivals, but they were also stuck with each other. Britain's industrial machine needed raw cotton from the American South, which created a complicated mix of dependence and resentment. In London, America was seen as a brash upstart. In Washington, Britain was seen as a domineering empire that refused to treat America as an equal. The idea of a special relationship would have been laughed out of the room. The real question was when, not if, the Third Anglo-American War would break out. And behind closed doors, military planners on both sides were drawing up the maps for it. So what changed? How did these two rivals start the slow, cautious move toward friendship? The answer, as it often is in geopolitics, comes down to new threats and a practical look at shared interests. As the 19th century came to a close, the world was changing. Britain, which had been the undisputed global superpower for a century, was starting to feel the strain of its massive empire. In Europe, a newly unified Germany was building a powerful navy to challenge British control of the seas. To the east, the Russian Empire was pushing up against the borders of British India. Suddenly, London's policy of splendid isolation started to look a lot more like dangerous isolation. At the same time, the United States was going through a massive transformation. The end of the Civil War had unleashed its industrial potential. Railroads connected the continent, factories were churning out steel, and its population was exploding. America wasn't just a regional player anymore. It was becoming a global power in its own right. This overlap of interests laid the groundwork for what historians call the Great Rapprochement. Britain, realizing it couldn't police the entire world by itself, began to see the U.S. not as a rival, but as a potential partner. A partner with a common language, similar democratic traditions, and most importantly, a shared interest in keeping the world order stable, an order they both benefited from. The shift was gradual. It was marked by a series of diplomatic moves and warming cultural ties. Britain quietly backed the U.S. in its 1898 war with Spain and basically handed over dominance in the Americas. In return, the U.S. started to see the British Empire less as a threat and more as a force for global stability. The rivalry didn't just disappear, but the math was changing. Both nations realized they had more to fear from a rising Germany or Russia than they did from each other. The foundation for an alliance was being laid, not on feelings, but on the cold, hard logic of geopolitical necessity. If the turn of the century laid the foundation, World War I was the crucible that started to weld the pieces together. When war broke out in 1914, the U.S. was officially neutral, but its economic and cultural ties pulled it heavily toward the Allied side. American banks funded the British and French war efforts, and American factories supplied them with crucial materials. But it was the Second World War that turned this partnership into a true, world-changing alliance. When Winston Churchill became Prime Minister in 1940, Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany. He knew Britain's survival depended on one thing: getting the United States and its industrial might into the war. His relationship with President Franklin D. Roosevelt is legendary. Through countless letters and secret meetings, Churchill laid out the stark threat fascism posed to the world. Roosevelt, dealing with an American public that wanted nothing to do with another European war, had to tread carefully. He came up with the Lend-Lease Act, a brilliant policy that turned the U.S. into the arsenal of democracy, sending Britain warships, planes, and weapons on credit. It was a lifeline. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, shattered American isolationism in an instant. Days later, Germany made the fatal mistake of declaring war on the U.S. America was all in, and the Anglo-American alliance became the core of the entire Allied war effort. This wasn't just a paper alliance. It was an unprecedented merging of two nations. Military commands were integrated. Intelligence agencies shared their deepest secrets, creating the foundation of what would become the Five Eyes Network. Scientists worked together on top-secret projects, most famously the Manhattan Project to build the atomic bomb. They planned not just for winning the war, but for designing the post-war world, creating the United Nations, the World Bank, and the IMF. This wartime partnership was the moment the power shift became official. Britain, exhausted and bankrupt after 6 years of total war, had survived, but the United States emerged as the world's undisputed economic and military superpower. The old master and the former apprentice had fought side by side, but their roles had now been permanently reversed. It was Churchill who, in a famous 1946 speech, would popularize the term that has defined the relationship ever since: the special relationship. As the smoke cleared from World War II, a new threat emerged: the Soviet Union. The start of the Cold War ensured that the wartime alliance between the U.S. and UK wasn't just a temporary arrangement. It was now a permanent fixture of the new world order. The special relationship was about to be locked in. The first and most important pillar was NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, formed in 1949. This defensive pact made the American security guarantee for Western Europe official. An attack on one was an attack on all, and the core of that promise was the partnership between Washington and London. With its global experience and diplomatic skill, Britain became America's most important deputy in the fight against communism. In the shadows, the relationship got even deeper. The intelligence sharing from the war grew into the highly secret UK-USA agreement, which expanded to include Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, forming the Five Eyes. To this day, it's the most integrated intelligence sharing alliance in the world, a sign of the incredible trust between the two countries. That trust was most obvious when it came to nuclear weapons. The 1958 Mutual Defense Agreement was a landmark deal. It let the UK buy and adapt American nuclear technology, essentially having America underwrite Britain's status as a nuclear power. Britain's nuclear deterrent, carried on its submarines, has relied on U.S.-built missiles ever since. The strength of the alliance often depended on the personal chemistry between leaders. The bond between Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and President Ronald Reagan in the 1980s is a classic example. They shared a conservative ideology and a fierce opposition to communism, creating a powerful political team. During the Falklands War in 1982, the Reagan administration provided critical intelligence and supplies to the British, a favor Thatcher repaid with her staunch support for American foreign policy. But this period also made the imbalance in the relationship clear. Britain was America's most reliable ally, but it was definitely the junior partner. Decisions made in Washington had huge consequences for London, but the reverse wasn't always true. The special relationship was certainly special, but it was no longer a relationship of equals. Beyond the military and intelligence ties, the power shift was cemented by an incredibly deep economic relationship. The City of London and Wall Street became the twin engines of global finance, an axis that has shaped the world economy for decades. Today, the United States and the United Kingdom are each other's single biggest foreign investors. Well over $1.5 trillion are invested across the Atlantic, creating a complex web of mutual dependence. Roughly 1 million jobs in each country are directly tied to businesses from the other. This goes way beyond simple trade. It's a deep fusion of capital, markets, and companies. Bilateral trade is huge, topping $386 billion in 2023. For the UK, the US is its most important single trading partner by a wide margin. For the US, the UK is a vital market and a key gateway to global finance. This economic bond has survived political drama and global crises. When the UK left the European Union in 2020, Brexit raised questions about Britain's role in the world, but it also pushed London to focus even more on its economic relationship with Washington. While a big, comprehensive free trade deal has been hard to pull off politically, they found other ways to cooperate. In June 2023, they signed the Atlantic Declaration, a strategic deal focused on the industries of the future. Instead of a classic trade deal, it created a roadmap for working together on things like critical minerals, AI, and quantum computing. The goal is to build secure supply chains and make sure the two countries lead the next technological revolution. Meetings to push this forward continued right through 2024 and 2025. This economic partnership is the modern-day proof of the power shift. The UK, once the world's banker, now finds its economic fate deeply tied to the American economy. It's a constant, intricate dialogue that highlights both their shared prosperity and the reality of where the world's economic center of gravity now sits. Today, the US-UK special relationship is at a fascinating point, facing new global challenges and a constant debate about what it really is. The core of the alliance, defense and intelligence cooperation through NATO, the Five Eyes, and newer pacts like AUKUS is as strong as ever. But the political side of things can be a lot more complicated. The personal vibe between leaders still sets the tone. The dynamic has swung wildly, from the ideological sync of Thatcher and Reagan to more practical partnerships under recent leaders. Brexit has fundamentally changed Britain's place in the world, in many ways. Leaving the EU has made the UK more dependent on its American partnership, but it's also sparked an old debate inside Britain about the risks of relying too much on the US and always being seen as the junior partner. From the American side, the UK is no longer its main bridge into the EU, which has arguably lessened its strategic value in Washington's eyes. This has led some to wonder if the relationship is still special, or if it's just becoming another business-as-usual alliance. The future is uncertain. A major shift in American foreign policy, like a return to a more America-first approach, could put real strain on the relationship. Disagreements over trade, security, and how to deal with rising powers like China show where the cracks could appear. And yet, the foundation is incredibly solid. The two countries share military bases, from quiet airfields in England to the vital joint facility at Diego Garcia. Their armed forces train together so closely that their playbooks are almost identical. When a global crisis hits, the first phone call from Washington is still very often to London, and vice versa. The relationship is a complex tapestry woven over 100 years. It's no longer a bond between equals, and maybe it never really was. It has morphed from the hostility of a colony and its former master to a pragmatic partnership, and finally, to the deeply integrated and sometimes complicated alliance we see today. From the shores of Yorktown to the joint command centers of today, the journey of the United States and Great Britain is one of history's most stunning reversals of fortune. The story started with open conflict and was defined by a century of rivalry. It changed out of necessity when common enemies forced them to realign. It was forged into a true alliance in the fires of two world wars and cemented during the long struggle of the Cold War. The power shift was complete. A republic born in defiance of an empire grew to overshadow it, eventually bringing its former master into a new global system of its own design. Today, that relationship keeps evolving. It's an alliance built on unmatched military intelligence and economic ties, but it's constantly tested by new challenges and changing politics. It's less a story of a natural friendship and more a story about the power of shared interests and the cold logic of geopolitics. The big question is, in a world with new rising powers and huge global problems, what does the next chapter for the special relationship look like? If you found this deep dive into the US-UK power shift interesting, hit the like button and subscribe for more videos explaining the forces that shape our world. And let us know in the comments, do you think the special relationship is still truly special? We'd love to hear what you think. Thanks for watching.